Brilliant. Okay, so the recording started. So I wonder, and I think Becca might be able to help me with this because I can't see the individual people watching this demonstration, but who, like a show of hands maybe, about who already makes wreaths, and who already, some people might have them on their door already, or they have a good memory of making them with friends. Does anyone want to speak out? I can see one person. Holly. Is it Holly?
No, never made one.
Never made one, but might make one this year.
I've made one every year for the last 5 years, I think.
Oh, fantastic.
Wow.
Fantastic. So we've got a real range of people who are really experienced about making wreaths, have their own style and their own way of doing it. And then we've got people who perhaps have never contemplated making a wreath, and this year might be the year that you start. So we're going to keep it really basic, start from the very beginning. And then those with more experience, I'd love it if you wanted to share your experience with the rest of the group.
Jenny, I think we had a couple of other people with their hands up. I think
yes.
we had.
Oh, yes, I can't see.
Yeah, no, don't worry, I can look for you. So I think we had Eva.
I've never made a garland, so a circle, but I usually put a spray of ivy, laurel, whatever I can find with a ribbon. And yeah, so I'd like to make a round one.
Fantastic. And you know, that's really on trend to have, instead of a wreath, a circle, to have that sort of collection of greenery just strung up, but with a ribbon and hung upside down. That seems to be what all the florists are offering this year. So you're ahead of the trend.
I'm going backwards then.
Yes, everything comes around, doesn't it? Yes. Anybody else?
I think we had Anne as well, who had her hand up.
Yeah, I've made one. I've made one before, but never very well, and I've lost all my bits. But I have found a small frame, and my daughter's laughing at me on the phone. She is dialing in from Florence. So
amazing.
Wow. So she would find very different foliage, maybe olive branches and things.
I don't know. She's hiding in the kitchen now. I can see it.
No need to hide. Okay, so lovely. Thank you so much for participating. So I wondered if we can start with a bit of a game, and Becca will be a scribe in the chat, and if we can all try and get to 20 things, natural things, that you might want to put on a wreath. So I'll start you off. Maybe we could start with some holly. So just shout out, no need to put your hands up. Quick fire round.
Ivy.
Ivy, holly, ivy. Dried oranges.
Hawthorn.
Laurel.
Hawthorn, laurel. So we've got lovely
rosemary
at the moment. Can you say that again?
Rosemary.
Rosemary, yep, some herbs.
Berries.
Seed heads.
I've got some Lelandii.
Lelandii, and somebody's typed in snowberry.
Seed heads.
Seed heads, yep. So we've got some seed heads here.
Eucalyptus.
Eucalyptus, yes. If you've got one growing.
We're trying.
Trying, me too.
Heather.
Heather, yes, that's a good idea. What about, does anyone know what these are?
Can't see them.
Or can you see? Let me just
Teasels.
Teasels, yes.
Euonymus.
Oh, what was that one?
Euonymus.
Euonymus, yes.
I've got a bit of pampas grass.
Pampas grass, yes. I bet that's lovely with the extra texture.
Lavender.
Lavender.
Crab apples, lavender. Are we at 20 yet?
I think we might be. Let me just give it a
So if we're not, we could maybe put beech leaves. Or any lovely leaves that are still on the branches.
Cut some heads.
Moss.
Did someone say moss?
Yeah.
Yeah, moss as well. So you
done.
Lovely. And so that list is like an endless list of possibilities. but we can see just from that list, there's a whole range of things that we can go out and collect to make our
If
wreath.
it's Bob, will you? I don't.
Oh, is somebody wanting to talk?
I
No,
think it was
maybe not.
somebody on the phone.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you can see that there's a whole range of items that we can forage for and to put on a wreath to make each one really personal and unique. I've collected a few things this afternoon, all within maybe a 5-minute walk of my house, which is sort of an urban setting in Chesterfield. And I've got it from a local sort of common area. So I think a bit of a word about guidance about where we can get our foliage from. So in theory, we need to ask permission from the landowner. That's sometimes not very easy if it's the council or you know, an unknown landowner. So if it's a hedgerow, we usually say just take small snippets of things in abundance that aren't rare, and you need to be able to use your judgment on that. What we're really not allowed to do, because it's against the law, is dig plants up and take from private, like other people's gardens or private woodland. So something that's on a hedgerow or a little common ground or a forgotten in-between space, sort of brownfield space, they are often brilliant for finding interesting foliage, but we need to be respectful of others, and we also need to make sure that we're not taking too much, because if we think there's 30 odd people here in this recording, if we all went out and got armfuls of foliage, the hedgerows and the areas would be completely denuded, and we would be losing our habitat, which is, you know, we need to keep for the wildlife. So it's about using our judgment and thinking, is what I'm taking going to negatively affect this area? And only take what you need, because you can always come back and fetch some more. Does that feel an okay thing for everybody? Has anyone got any questions about that? About where we get the items from? Do shout out, I think, if you want.
I just wanted to, it's not really a question, I just wanted to say that if you're collecting your own moss, try and get it from like an urban setting, don't get it from any woodland.
Yes,
take it from stone, because it's really important in helping break down rotting wood. So
that is a really good point. Thank you. So when we go out for our walk, we tend to be thinking, right, okay, our eyes are open, we're using our senses, but how do we know what's there? And the best way of knowing what's there and what you can anticipate to be there is by taking that regular stroll in your local environment. So then you know all the nature on your doorstep. So then you can keep a check of things and think, right, okay, it's been a really windy last few weeks, maybe some pine cones have fallen, and go and collect some pine cones and you bring them back. So you might amass things for your wreath or things that can help you bring nature indoors throughout the whole year, and then just pick the fresh stuff on the day that you're going to make the wreath. And what's really nice is if you go with a friend, and then it's a joint effort, and you've got that social time as well. So hands up or shout out if you're going to be making along with me, or if you're so there's a few people. Okay, so what stage are people at? Have people got some sort of base for your wreath? Lovely, lovely. Just in case you haven't, some people might be starting with some willow they may have picked, or they may have got. Willow tends to be grown commercially down in Somerset, and there's two main suppliers that I've found that are quite reliable. So there's Somerset willow and Musgrove willow. Both are online ordering, and you can see that this is commercially grown. It's beautifully straight. They've prepared it by removing all the leaves. and it's been, and you tend to buy them in set lengths. So I think this is probably 3 foot, so it's about an arm span away, long. A little bit about terminology. I'm not a complete willow expert, but I know a little bit, and I've learned a lot along the way. So when we talk about a willow stem, the thick end is known as the butt, and the thin end is known as the tip. I don't know, can you see that? So this is fresh willow that may have only been harvested about 2 weeks ago, so it's still very, very pliable. It's a strong, flexible stem. If you buy it dry, you'll need to soak it in a bath or in a soak bag for a few days to get it to be all bendy again. So we're really lucky that it's winter, and winter is the time that they harvest the willow. So this is the first stage is to take your willow and form it into a circle. You would still want to hold it where you've got the join of the butt against the mid bit of the willow. And then each time,
too big.
Is that a question?
You can always have it like partly down, partly down.
I was thinking you don't need a huge one, do you? What about that?
I don't think that's a question. Okay, so then what you want to do is build up your, I call it a hoop, your circle of willow or circle of hazel, dogwood, all work really well. Anything that's flexible and doesn't work and won't crack when you bend it. Don't worry about bits of your hoop or your willow that stick out from your circle. We'll deal with those at the end. So just continue, and don't to add the willow. I tend to keep moving my circle round and put the butt at different places, and I just find that keeps it a little bit stronger. Don't worry if your pieces of willow aren't perfectly aligned. If that actually is helpful for making a wreath, because it gives you little gaps and spaces where you can feed in your foliage. So, and don't worry about if it's not a perfect circle. That doesn't matter at all. And like everything, we're working with a natural material. So some pieces of willow, they just won't want to bend. And no matter what you do, it won't go in the shape that you want it. So I think life is far too short to struggle over a piece of willow. So I just discard that one and then pick another. So you can decide how thick you want to make your base. So that, I think I've used 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 pieces of willow, and I think that's an okay start. If you want, you can make it thicker and thicker too. Sometimes when I've done this in Wild at Heart groups, people have made it the size of, like, you can't put your fist round. So if you've got the resources to use, you can be creative. But I think as a minimum, you probably want about 4 pieces of willow bent round. And obviously you can control the size. So if you want to do a mini wreath, you obviously make your hoop, your base smaller. And in some groups, I've had very ambitious people who've tried to join various pieces of willow together to make massive wreaths with varying successes. So I would, for your first wreath, start with something like this, which is perfect for your door. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question.
Of course.
I don't have any willow or wood. I have wire.
Yeah, so that's okay. So is it wire that's already in a shape?
No, but I have like the pliers and stuff to put it into a shape. But would you just do a similar technique with the kind of adding?
So I found this is actually a heart shape, but you can see the same sort of thing. So I would, with your wire, is it quite stiff?
No, it's very pliable. It's crafting wire.
Crafting wire. Okay, so if it's very, very thin, you might want to double or triple it up so it gives it a bit of strength.
Okay.
And then you would start maybe with just making a circle. So if we imagine this is a piece of your wire, just form it best you can in a circle, and with pliers, do what I'm doing, wrapping it round. And then if you think what you've made with just one piece of wire or two pieces of wire is too flimsy, make another and then use a bit more wire to tie them together. It's a bit of, with everything with wreath making, it's all a bit of an experiment, and you can always backtrack and undo something and start again, because we do that a lot. So with a wire base, I would not worry too much, but basically you want something that you can hang your pieces of foliage on. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Has anyone else got any questions? Silence. Okay, I'll take that as a good thing. So once you've put your willow hoop to your desired thickness, this one probably has about 10 pieces of willow twisted round. As you can see, I've got the ends of the willow, the thicker ends haven't managed to be bent into the hoop. So I'm going to take my secateurs. With secateurs, they're a very useful tool, but they could also chop your finger off. So when I am working with secateurs, there's a few golden rules. So before I start, I've found them and they're in the closed position with the lock on. So if I'm not using them, I just put the safety catch on, which keeps the blades together. So then if I'm ferreting around for my secateurs in the foliage, I'm not going to grab a sharp blade. So I'm going to use my secateurs. I'm not going to practice what I preach. So usually I tell people to focus on using the blade and using the secateurs to cut your willow. It helps if you don't, if you're not talking to a neighbour at the time. So you need to look where the blades are. Obviously keep your fingers away, and if you can, cut your willow at a bit of an angle, a little bit proud of where the rest of the hoop is, because as the fresh willow dries, it will shrink, and as it shrinks back, if you cut it super close to the edge of your willow, your hoop, it will start to unravel. So this way, when it dries, it's still a little bit proud of the hoop. It doesn't matter if it does unravel, but you can, if it dries out nicely, reuse your hoops for many years. So there, I've tidied it up a bit. So cut off all the stray bits of willow. And I think the first step is and obviously making a willow wreath can be done in all different ways. This is just my way that we're doing it today. But you would find your own way that you're happy with. So I tend to start with my willow base, and then I foraged a few bits this afternoon. Some, I think this is blue spruce. Can you see? It's a bit like a Christmas tree. It smells like a kind of pine, and it is not too prickly. And you can see the needles are all in little clusters. And so it's quite good for putting texture onto your wreath. So I use the foliage, something I've got in abundance, to be my background, if you like, to your wreath. And then the things which are more precious, if you like, that I've got less of, like maybe these poppy seed heads, the dried pieces, the dried honesty seed heads, which I've peeled, removed the seeds from, and you can see that they're these beautiful white seed, the seed capsule is left. Things which are less abundant, I use as embellishments, so they become the star of the show. And then the background, if you like, is all the different textures of greenery and foliage that we have. I don't know if anyone can see on here. So I've actually, just for show, for contrast, I've left about a third of the wreath without any embellishments, and then on the other side I've made little posies of foliage and greenery with some of the more precious treasures that I've found. So if I show you a little bit about how I might go about attaching these bigger pieces of foliage. So again, I'm using my secateurs, putting the safety catch on when I put it on the table. Can you see I've got a snipping here, probably about, I don't know, it depends, about 6 to 8 inches, about 25 centimeters, something like that. Obviously you can cut your pieces to fit your wreath. So if you were making a tiny mini wreath, you might start with tiny little pieces of foliage. What I tend to do is, can you see I've removed some of the bottom leaves, and so then you've got the twiggy bit, which I'm going to try and find a hole, a gap within this willow frame to push it into. At the moment, I don't really have any design ideas about how this wreath is going to look. I just go with it. And what I might do is start putting in, snipping the foliage and putting it in as I go. And I'm not too worried about what angle it is or how it's laying together. All I'm doing is finding little gaps in my frame. Sometimes you have to pull what you've where you've weaved it closely, you might have to pull it apart, but this fresh willow tends to be quite robust. You can pull it and twist it to fit your pieces of foliage in. And does anyone want to say if they're doing this on at the moment and how you're finding it?
Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm cheating a little bit by holding it in place with little bits of wire just to make it a bit firmer.
That's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. So if some people, if they didn't want to use wire but still wanted to tie their bits of foliage into their frame, you can use use cotton thread, which I will come to later. So there's a little roll of cotton thread. You could use florist tape, which is some waxed paper that when it gets a bit warmer with the heat of your hands, it becomes a bit sticky or tacky. And it looks like this. It comes in a roll and looks like this. And it's very good at fixing foliage together. So where am I? So how are you finding the process, even if you're using the wire to tie it in?
Can you get that sticky stuff from florists? Is that what?
Yes. So let me just show you. You can either buy this in places like hobbycraft, craft shops, florists.
Oh, right. Okay.
If you're in Sheffield, there is a really good florist wholesalers quite near the bypass.
Oh, we're in Brussels. I'm not sure that will help.
But I'm sure you'll find the equivalents.
I think you
Just
get it online. You can find it.
That's okay.
Find it online.
That's all right, Sarah.
You get it online.
Yeah, you can definitely get it online. It comes in different colours, but usually green is most helpful.
I was going to say I got mine from the range and then some also from eBay, so I think you'll be fine.
It's definitely the right time of year to want to buy it.
Jenny, Jill has asked, can you use plastic cable clips as well?
You could do. So the thing about this sort of wreath making is that anything that you can find helpful, use it. Some people are very sort of purists and they say, right, nothing that's non-biodegradable is going to go onto my wreath. and others just want to enjoy the process and you know, have a bit of fun. And I've seen nothing wrong with either choice, and especially because these plastic clips could be reused, so it's not just a waste. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
I had a question,
Yeah.
just so that I don't get carried away and forget to do this part. I've got some little fairy lights that I wanted to weave in there. What stage would be best to add those?
Usually I add the fairy lights last.
Okay.
When we were making the willow hearts last week, that's exactly what we did. We put our willow together. We added any foliage or decoration or embellishments we wanted, and then we were able to twist the fairy lights around the hearts, and then I don't know if your fairy lights have a little battery pack.
They do, yeah.
And I just tuck that, I was tucking that in just where we tied the heart together. So in this case, it might if you're putting a ribbon or something on, you could slot it into behind your ribbon so it doesn't hang down.
Lovely, thank you.
And then just be careful. I don't know where you're planning to put your wreath.
Not outside.
Not outside. That's it. So some fairy lights are okay outside, and some are much better indoors. Any other questions? So for the people who have some fresh foliage in front of them, we're sort of doing this as a task-based thing, but have you had to stop for a moment and actually had a look and a feel of the textures, even bring it up to your nose and smell it and see if the different pieces of foliage smell differently? So you can often, if you rub it a little bit between your finger and your thumb, and it might just generate some heat, and it might just bring out a smell. So that's a nice thing to do. Somebody, when we were first looking at things to put on a wreath, mentioned some herbs, and so I've got a few herbs here. I've got some sage, which has definitely seen some better days, but still smells nice. I've got I'm not sure if you would class it as a herb because I'm not sure if it's edible, but this plant, it's got like silvery green foliage and it smells really strongly of a curry smell. So I tend to put that on. It grows in the wildlife garden at Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust. But the great thing about these wreaths, if you're passing them every day, if it's on your front door or above your fire, if you brush past it and you've got a few herbs in there, you'll get that nice aroma, which is really lovely. So that's a couple of different herbs. Somewhere I've got some rosemary. I'm sure it will pop up. So as you can see, you're working at your own time. You can start to fill your base with the greenery. When you get to the point where it's fully covered, it would be time to start adding on any embellishments you want. So this is where people's personalities really come out. So in my experience, when I've done wreath making workshops, you can all start with the same sort of ingredients, if you like, for your wreath, but every wreath will be completely different. And that is absolutely brilliant. So your own personal sense of style comes out. Some people like very, very simple, maybe just foliage, no embellishments, and they want it very rustic looking. And other people really go to town. They want everything on, all the bling, and they make something, really, really big. And then people might want to put pine cones on. They might not want pine cones or teasels for all different reasons. And that's where connecting with nature really has a good crossover with this activity, because as adults we often don't play enough. Our lives are full of all sorts of responsibilities. We might have a job, we might be raising a family, we might be looking after animals or pets, we might be having caring responsibilities, lots and lots of things going on in our busy lives. and play gets squeezed down to such a small amount that we forget what it's like to have that joy of just having fun, just doing it for the fun of it, and not worrying about perfection or what anyone else is going to think of us. And the more we can build that into our lives, we can really get in touch with what we want and what brings us the joy, because where you find the joy is where you can find your well-being often. So with nature connection, it's all very well knowing what something's called, but that's not real nature connection, just being able to name something. In fact, we don't even have to name something to feel connected to nature and the wildlife and the landscape. What it's about is about how the nature makes us feel, the emotions it brings up in us, and then decisions and actions that we might make because of our nature connection. So it's being studied at the moment in lots of different places, but very locally in Derby University with Miles Richardson and his team. They are looking into how nature connection affects well-being, because it's all very well saying to somebody, go outside, it's good for you, but nobody likes to be told what's good for them, and without knowing what's going on with that actual person, that might not be very helpful at all. So it's much more personal than that. So finding your own connection to nature, completely subjective and different for each person, and we all go at different paces. So they have constructed 5 pathways to nature connection to help us understand it and to feel closer to nature. I've just got it on a note so I get them in the right order so it makes more sense. So the first one is known as contact. And this is what we've been doing tonight, really. This is when we're out foraging, we're in physical contact with the natural environment. We're looking closer. When I was selecting these beech leaves, there was a big tree, lots of branches, but I was looking for the tips of the branches, which still had their leaves attached, and I was feeling them to check they weren't too crispy and they were going to just ping off and fall off by the time I got it home. So I'm looking deeper at something rather than just a surface look. And then that brings us on to, once you've looked at something and you're using all your senses, you might be able to find beauty in it. Something like, well, I think the challenge is to find beauty in everything. So even from the slugs that were pests in our gardens to the old pine cones that are beginning to rot down, that we've picked maybe 2 years ago, pre-COVID, maybe 3 years ago, we picked these in Clifton Park in Rotherham. Has a lovely ornamental sugar pine in the rock garden, and it's a very regular pastime of ours at the Wild at Heart group in Rotherham to go and visit our sugar pine to see if any of the pine cones have fallen. These are very, very dry. They're I think it is the sap. When they fall, they're very, very sticky with a kind of resinous sap. They make excellent firelighters. Oh dear. And also they'll stick to your fingers. It's almost like a glue. If you gather them up using your t-shirt, like I did once, that you have to say goodbye to that t-shirt because it will never come out. But once they've dried, they're actually beautiful for putting on a wreath. But actually, if you just look at them more deeply, you can see there's lovely symmetry there. And you know, you could even go down the line of researching about fractals and finding out about nature's geometry. So then, once you've taken time to appreciate something, and that might be noticing the beauty of the part of nature that you're looking at, you might want to find the meaning, and that meaning is different for every single person. So consider what it means to you. So like, well, hedgehogs seem to be universally popular, and I think they've got lots of myths and folklore that's associated with them. So it's very easy to find a personal meaning to that. things like the holly, age-old plants, and often in the sort of the Sheffield area was grown and used to make the feed. So for if it's a very harsh winter and the snow lays for a long time and the sheep can't access the grass, they used to cut down the hollies to feed their sheep. So it can be a meaning of finding that sustenance during hard times. The berries often signify to people, they're often a cheery colour, either yellow, red, and that might just lift your spirits. And so you might really find a lot of meaning and connecting to the different plants. And then so from the meaning, you might get to an emotion. So some people, it's always nice to see the positive side and see the happiness and the joy in it, but actually emotion is the full spectrum of our thoughts and our feelings and what comes up for us, and it definitely isn't the same for everybody. So sometimes for example, strong smells like herbs, these are really, really personal, because if your sense of smell of sage reminds you of a negative experience, then somebody saying, oh, smell this sage, it's wonderful, isn't going to be very helpful. So that's when we work with all different people, we find out what they think about this sage rather than what I think of it as a practitioner, because that's really helpful to get to know another person and not make assumptions about what's good and what's bad, because that is different for every person. And then once we feel something about it, we care about it more. So, and we're more likely to take an action. So that brings up compassion, which is the fifth pathway to nature connection. So once we're feeling something about a part of nature, we might think about what we can do to protect it or to support it or to live our lives in a way that aligns well with the natural environment. And again, that is we're all on a different path and a different journey with that. Some people go the whole hog and want to live the zero carbon lifestyle, and it's everything they live, think and breathe. And others are just finding out about it, making smaller choices, but actually they're discovering it for themselves. So there's no judgment about where you are on that, but just that you can take action. And things like joining your local wildlife trust is a really nice way to demonstrate your care for the local environment. So that's a little bit about the 5 pathways to nature connection. If you want to find out more, you could Google Finding Nature and look for the blog, which is written by Miles Richardson, and it comes every few weeks. There's some more thoughts about how you can think more deeply about the 5 pathways to nature connection, and whatever fits with you, you can take on into your life. So how are the people doing who've been putting foliage on? Are you just about there? Little bit, ready to move on? I'll show you the next bit.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
I don't have the conifer that you've got, and the bulk of my greenery is ivy, and there are some quite long pieces. Am I better to cut them and feed them in, or wrap them round?
So if your long pieces of ivy are flexible, I would definitely wrap them round. I'm just trying to look for an example. Oops, got some fairy lights attached to this piece. Can you see here? It's quite flexible.
Yes.
And I could probably weave that in and around on my frame.
Okay.
If it's too stiff to bend easily, then obviously you can trim it into smaller pieces and poke it in. And ivy depends how it grows and what species it is. It grows in different formations. So you've got pieces like you've probably got, which are more flexible and growing on a longer stem. And then we've got other, we've got the parts of, this is actually a different type of ivy, but can you see this has got the berries on?
No.
Can you see that? So from the flowers, the berries are formed, and these grow on quite stiff little stems up from the main ivy plant. So I've just snipped those off. This is one thing that we do want to leave in abundance, because birds like blackbirds enjoy eating the ivy berries. So we don't want to take all the ivy berries, but a few for our wreath is perfectly okay. And the other thing about ivy, it's the eggs of the small holly blue butterfly. The holly blue butterfly will be in and around on the stems and under the leaves. So we don't want to take all of the foliage of one area, just in case we are taking all the eggs away from those future butterflies. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Good, good. So once you're happy with your foliage on your
Sorry, I just had a quick question about the caterpillars and the eggs. Sorry. So I did get my ivy from somewhere where it was growing in abundance, but if there's any eggs on here, would there be any chance of being able to save them if I just shook it very vigorously near my own ivy plants?
I think so. I mean, that's just being considerate. So if you you doing that isn't going to cause any harm, and if it does help them, that's all for the better.
Okay,
I think it's like, yeah, I think it's like just doing what we think is, the best decision with the information we've got. Any more questions? Okay, so the next bit is, I call these little posies. You might have another word for them, but I'm going to get my secateurs out again. And I'm going to make, well, depending how many you want to put on your wreath, but to fill a medium-sized wreath like this, you probably want 10 or 12 little posies of 3, 4, 5 sprigs of foliage, often with a little something unusual, which I call an embellishment. So that might be a teasel, it might be some honesty, and it doesn't matter if all of your little posies are different, because the look as you create and build up your next layer of wreath, you can then be artistic and decide, well, I want more honesty and I want less teasels on this one, and that's how you can really make it your own. So I would, and this is where it's very helpful if you have florist tape, but you can always use like the cotton or the string. If you wanted to use wire, you could wrap the wire around these posies. I've a bit like Blue Peter, I've prepared some of these pieces of tape earlier. So you just want a shortish piece, just enough to wrap around the stems of your posy a couple of times. There's no need to use meters and meters of it on each piece. So all you want to do, wrap it around your few bits of foliage, and then pop that on your table and carry on, keep repeating that process till you've got about 10 or so, or you think that you've got enough, or you've had enough of that particular task. So I think maybe a pine cone might look quite good. And here's a piece of that sage which I talked about earlier. And then here, okay, so I'm just going to pop the pine cone down a bit because there's another way to add a pine cone. So I'm just going to choose maybe some of these lovely copper beech leaves. And these were inspired by my friend showing me some of the Christmas trees in Crich, I think it was, or maybe Cromford. I think it was Cromford. And she showed me a lovely Christmas tree which was decorated with these lovely copper beech leaves all strung together. So I think they've probably picked the leaves off and with a needle passed a piece of cotton all the way through. So that makes a lovely alternative to something like tinsel. And obviously when you've finished with it in the new year, you can just pop it outside or in a compost heap, and it will all degrade, biodegrade, and then you can then put it on the soil and the cycle continues. So it doesn't matter what your little posies are like. They might be a little bit wonky, they might be one bit sticking out and not the quite way that you expected it to, but that's all about, it's a really nice lesson in accepting it is what it is, and kind of seeing the beauty regardless of what our expectation is. So how are you going with the making any posies? Or anyone got any questions? Did my best bit and dropped my notes. Any questions?
I had a more general question.
Yeah.
I think I would like to try and make one of these for my mum for Christmas, but I'm wondering how long do they typically last? Like how close to Christmas should I be making it for her?
So if you're going to pop them outside, they do. So, and depending what you use. So if you're using foliage like this ivy, which is nice and waxy, it doesn't lose water very easily. It will last 3-4 weeks, even more. I've had people come on wreath making sessions, about this time of year. Then in January or February, when I see them, they'll say, "Oh, I've still got that wreath," and it will just naturally change over time. But I think if you want to make it look in sort of peak condition, you can make it like a week before, and if you are minded to, you could spray it with a little mister spray just to you just keep it looking really good.
Do you mean just spray it with water, like?
Yeah, with water.
humidity?
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
I think, but obviously the closer you can make it in the time when you're going to see your mum, then it will look at its best and last last with her for longer. What I also suggest to people is that these wreaths are really ephemeral. Just because we've made this one this week, and maybe say in 2 weeks' time, just before Christmas, it might be looking a little bit tired or a bit wind battered, I can unpick it. I might go for another walk and I might make another one and change things up. So just because you've made it this way now doesn't mean it has to stay like that forever. So you can enjoy it for a few weeks, and then when you want to change it up, just maybe unpick some of your posies. The spruce foliage should still be okay, and then you can just change it as you wish. How does that sound?
Good, thank you very much.
Good. And another thing you can do, which is it's a bit like, so today we're doing this online, and it's slightly artificial, because if we were all in a room together, there'll be a lot of chatting and sociability going on. But wreath making can be such a fantastic social experience, because often wreath making is easier to do with a friend, because quite often like this, I could do with a friend holding these together while I apply the florist tape. So then there's that kind of teamwork and the getting to know someone, finding out what they think about it, having that positivity of complimenting your work and you bonding with them by complimenting their work. It can be really nice to plan to do a bit of a craft afternoon with friends. So you could go for a walk together, gather your greenery, and then come home, have a cup of tea and maybe some festive snacks, and you can work together and make your wreath, and then all go home together with them. So that's a nice idea. And if you really get into the hang of making these, it's really nice to make for friends and family, but it's also really nice to make for maybe a lonely neighbour who you haven't had a chat to for a while, because it's a wonderful icebreaker to be able to go around and offer them the wreath that you've thought of them and made for them. And it can be really, cheering to know that someone else has thought of you in these times of sort of isolation. I think we've all come to know our neighbours a bit more. So we're coming to the end of the session, and I'm very happy to answer any questions or talk about wreaths or any other ideas about nature connection, or how nature and people can be connected. But I just want to show you a few ways that you can finish off your wreath. So I like to, first of all, each of those little posies you would then attach all the way around your wreath, or like this one, I've left this without any posies, just to show off this lovely blue spruce texture. Some people even like to not put any foliage on and like to show off the bark of the pieces of willow. So this is where you can really make it your own. But I often say to people, have a look at your wreath and think to yourself, does it need any more? Would it, is there something missing that I'd like to put on it? And then you can keep having a look at it. When you feel like you've finished, or you're on the way to finishing, if you have any ribbon or cloth which you want to cut up, it can be really nice just to tie something on here, just to add a bit of, it's sort of traditional, and I think some people really like the look of a ribbon or a cloth tied onto their wreath. The other thing you can do, which depending on how you're going to plan to hang your wreath, is, I'm just looking around because I've got a piece of string here. So traditionally, wreaths might be hung on a door to welcome people into your home. You might put them above your fireplace. You might hang them on a window. So you might put them outside in the garden for people to enjoy. So wherever you want to put your wreath, that is totally fine. If you want to suspend it on a nail, you might not need to add a piece of string. You can just put your nail in the, say if it was a shed, put the nail in the shed, the wood of the shed, and leave a bit of the nail sticking out, and you could hang your wreath on that. Most of us don't want to put a nail in our doors or walls, so these wonderful things called suction cup hooks, which you can buy from all sorts of different places like pound shops or hardware stores, allow us, and this is probably a bit one of these things in times of COVID where, are you allowed to do this anymore? But you tend to have to lick or wet the ends of the plasticky round circle of the suction hook, and then you can, I think you will be able to see, if I just demonstrate, you just press it against some glass or plastic and just make it stick. So you give it a push, make it stick, and then with your piece of string, which you've tied around your wreath, you can then, this is a moment of truth really, that it will actually stay, but you can just hook the string around the suction hook. You can put that as a piece of ribbon, as a piece of cloth. You can make it look beautifully ornate, or just a simple piece of garden string does the job. It just depends on what look you're going for. And I think with everything like this, there's always feelings of, oh, I wish it was different. Oh, it's not like the one in the magazine. It's my friend's ones is better. All of that goes on, and it always runs within us. But actually, if you can stand back and have a look at your wreath and what you've made, and maybe notice 3 good things about it, and that might be, well, I've joined in with an online session. That might be a good thing. It might be that I've found the beech leaves, which I was thinking may have all blown away, or it might be the beauty of the ivy berries. Whatever it is, really try and focus on that, and that helps us to train our brain to really see the positive. And it doesn't always completely outweigh that kind of negative chat that we have in ourselves, but it goes a long way to really help us see and feel like that accomplishment of us, of what we've made, and of how we've created something. And I would love to see, if you make your wreaths over the next few days and weeks, I would love to see them either with you, sort of, you can pose with your wreath, or if you want to share it, a picture of it hanging on your door above your mantelpiece, or wherever you've decided to put it. I would really love to see whatever you've created. And if you're happy to, I'd like to share that on the Wildlife Trust Facebook page, because it will inspire other people to do it and find that beauty and connection and joy in getting closer to nature. Just before we end, has anyone got any questions or comments or things that they want to share on the Padlet? I don't know if Tanya can have a look at the Padlet, see if anyone's put anything on it, or any comments of what they've created.
Got no new comments, but just Christina saying this has just been such a lovely session, thank you. And Anne saying that she made something in lovely company using lovely natural materials.
Fantastic.
And thank you so much. So a lot of lovely comments coming in for you, Jenny.
Oh, that's good. And I'm very happy, you know, these wreaths, I think commercially people are trying to say, oh, do a spring wreath, do a summer wreath, but actually you don't need to buy one. You could actually celebrate each season by making a different wreath. So I'd be very happy to share more about my love of plants and foliage and nature connection in a future session. If you want to suggest some topics, either me or one of my colleagues would love to do another evening like this.
Brilliant. We've just got lots of comments saying thank you so much. Thank
Lovely.
you for being brilliant. And if anyone wants to hold up their wreaths and show us where you've got to, that would be great too. Can see some people holding them up now.
Oh, look at that. That's
amazing.
Fab. Oh, it's really nice. So on the Padlet, my email is shared, but just in case you haven't accessed that, if I just read it out, that might be helpful. So it's j.king@wildsheffield.com. I'll say that again, j.king@wildsheffield.com. And I'd be happy to, you know, see your pictures and receive any feedback that you'd like to share.
I've put that in the chat as well.
Lovely.
I just wanted to say thank you for having this space online, because it's very important to people like me who are disabled and can't like risk going out and meeting in person. So this is really, really lovely.
Oh, I'm really pleased that we've been able to do this. And I think it's something new. I think over COVID, like before COVID, I think I would have never have dared to do an online wreath making session, which is such a physical physical activity that is great to be able to you know, show somebody how to do it in person. But actually throughout COVID, we've done so many Zoom and online meetings, it feels okay to be able to do this online, and we've managed. And so I'm really pleased that we've done it tonight.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Thank you. That's good. So I'm happy to stay online if anyone wants to ask any other questions. Otherwise, we'll just bring it to a close. And then if you can log off when you're ready. Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much. Very helpful.
Thank you. See you again. Bye-bye. Very good, Colin. I like it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I've just found a little slug who was on my foliage.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm going to
That
put them
really
outside.
Bringing indoors. My garden was inundated with slugs.
It's
this
really
past
tiny.
year.
It's such a baby.
And that's it.
It
Isn't
was
it?
just like a leaf.
You can really sort of, when you look at them closely, I know they're real pests and they'll eat beautiful plants, but actually they are marvelous and fascinating how they live and how they move around.
Yeah, I've definitely been trying to love bugs and other like kind of little things more this year. Green fly is still not on my happy list, but I'm not